Okay, welcome back, everybody. We've switched over now to our keynote speaker, Stephanie Chase, and here she goes.
Thanks, Lizette, and thank you everybody for having me today. I hope my sound is good. I'm in an office today, which I don't usually do, and so I'm so used to having my big headphones on at home. So it's kind of freeing to just speak publicly. But again, thank you for having me today to be part of your conference and part of really your conference theme to get about being online together. And so I want us to think today about the opportunity to do work, so together. So almost put that comma in and emphasize that together piece. To think about what it looks like when we prepare together for innovation. What happens when we prepare together for change? How do we really do that work? So we'll come back to this in a moment. I did want to give a little bit of information about me. Again, my name is Stephanie Chase, and I'm currently the executive director of the Libraries of Eastern Oregon, as well as the principal founder of the Constructive Disruption Consultancy. I've been working in libraries for over 20 years, spending time at some of our largest urban systems like New York Public and the Seattle Public Library, but also in some of our small rural libraries, having been a public library director in Vermont and New Hampshire for a decade. Most recently, I was the director of libraries for the city of Hillsborough, a city of about 100,000 just west of Portland, Oregon, which is where I am. So I was really lucky to become involved with the Koha community when I was still back in Vermont, where I helped found the Green Mountain Library Consortium, which manages Vocal. So Vocal is Vermont's Koha project, and there may be a few Vocal folks in the audience today. And since I have moved to the West Coast of the US, I haven't been able to work at a Koha library, and let me tell you that I miss it. It's quite something to be at a large, well-funded cooperative system, as I just was in Hillsborough, that spends a lot of money on an ILS that still can't do what I could do back at my small library in Vermont a decade ago. Something as simple as easily checking books out remotely. What's really stuck with me throughout this intervening time is the amazing collaboration of the Koha community. It's something truly unique and something to be treasured. I'm so thankful to have kept friends and colleagues I met during my direct involvement and to continue to see the excellent work of the community. I just want everyone in the moment to take a minute, just close your eyes and celebrate that special community that you belong to and that you contribute to, because it really is something to truly be celebrated. I also want to note that I'm on Twitter, and you can feel free to contact me there. My handle is there at the bottom of the screen at Acorns and Nuts. As we get started today, I want to pause first to acknowledge the traditional caretakers of our land. As I mentioned, I'm coming to you from the Portland, Oregon metro area, where we acknowledge the indigenous communities of the Multnomah, the Wasco, the Cowlitz, the Clackamas, the Clathamit, the Kalapua, the Tualatin, the bands of Chinook, and the Molalla, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. Each of you live in an area with a rich indigenous history. Please take a moment to acknowledge the traditional caretakers of the land where you live and commit to learning more about your indigenous communities if you have not yet done so. The purpose of acknowledging the local land is to tell the story of the coevolution of land, plants, animals, and humans who were here before people from Europe began replacing local history with their own, and to fill in the native history that's been missing from our awareness. A land acknowledgement recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land, and that the relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. So you'll remember that I'm asking us to focus on the together part of your conference theme. As I mentioned, the collaborative nature of the Koha community is one of the most treasured elements for me, and it's evident looking across the conference schedule. Looking at the words used to describe the presentations, I see words like adaptability, like investigate, learn, teamwork. I see colleagues working to present complex processes in an understandable way, and I see a focus on the things we do and we do better together. Open source is collaboration in action every day. Think of how many ways there are to participate in the community and offer your expertise. Think about how the whole foundation of open source software relies on the community to band together and decide where to head next, where to invest resources, and what's most important. Some of you listening may remember I was able to give the keynote at KohaCon in 2018 when it took place in my current hometown. The theme of that conference was Together Towards Tomorrow, and I spoke in my keynote in depth about managing change and radically rethinking how we work together to accomplish our mission and goals. Managing and leading change has long been a passion of mine. In addition to my engagement with the library community, I'm also a member of the Association of Change Management Professionals. It's on this theme of managing change that Lizette asked me to come and speak with you. Speaking about change management is something I love to do. I've been fortunate to present almost continuously at the ALA annual conference for more than a decade, and my presentations have almost always been focused on preparing for or managing change, whether as kind of a lone change agent or in a position with the ability to redefine a work culture. You can manage change on your own, but it is always, always better to do together. And I'm happy to be here today to talk a little bit more about managing change and managing change together. As I mentioned, back in Vermont, I was one of the 3 founding members of VOCAL, the Vermont organization of Koha Automated Libraries. VOCAL is a program of the Green Mountain Library Consortium, which was founded to help support access to resource and resource sharing in our small rural state. More than a decade ago, at the 2009 Free and Open Source Software Conference in Vermont, I shared thoughts from our work on the VOCAL project. And these are some of the thoughts that I shared. That the technology is almost always irrelevant because people will almost always want to hang on to what they already know. And I think if that is not the underlying theme of every change that we ever manage, then I don't know what is. That transparency is really important. We have to know and we have to ask what people's fears are. We have to build our network. We have to build a varied group, put in leadership the group trusts, and that we shouldn't let one person be the face or the tech support, which I bet resonates here, of the project. And that Koha was really a project of the future and not the past. And it was really patron-focused, focused on the needs of our users. That this project, this community offers a lot of opportunities for participation and at varying levels of commitment. That one of the things that's really important was to be welcoming, and that we have to, in a way, often throw people right into it and help people overcome their fears. We should harness the power of the word of mouth, that there's nothing like kind of a trusted friend or a trusted colleague who lets us know that something's cool or something works or something that we should try. We need to be really thoughtful about our timing, and that saving money is good, but helping people understand the benefits they can expect is even better. Pilot projects are a great way to start, and that we really have to make sure when we're working on something new, something that's innovative, something that's a little unknown, we really need to emphasize the mutual need that we have, that this thing, whatever it is, this change can really help solve. With each of these points, I really see how important collaboration is to doing this work. And with each reflection, I think we see lessons learned that are equally relevant today. I'm not sure that I would change any of those. I see them in the change projects that I've led since then. And I think we see, even though I didn't realize it at the time, an adherence to the principles of change management. There are a few that I'd like you to think a little bit more about. So let's start with the idea of being open. I find that when you offer lots of options for people to engage, they'll find a way to do so. And they'll find a way to do it in a way that they're comfortable. People want to see themselves in the work that they're asked to do, to see their contribution and the difference their contribution makes. Again, this is nothing new for the open source community. I mean, anyone who's fixed a bug or worked together to do so has felt this in action. We must make the avenues of possibility clear, because that openness is what really helps engagement grow. It removes fear for us. I think engagement can also transform the status quo. So take a moment and to just step beyond what you know and what's comfortable for you. That's what we're being asked to do on a regular basis. When was the last time you took a risk and you explored something new? So each of us here today are working in an organization that has a tolerance, I would say, or preference even, for change, which is ultimately about taking a risk. And that's because you've chosen to support a key tool in your libraries, which is your catalog, in a manner that is radically different from the majority, the way the majority chooses to. That's good, but we can't stop there. We need to be constantly pushing at the boundaries of our work. Again, people want to hang on to what they know. It's well documented across many areas of our lives. But people also want to feel the joy and the success of development and of developing and moving forward. The status quo, what exists currently, is rarely truly rewarding for anyone but the powerful few. But people will hold out, kind of stewing in that status quo, thinking they can outlast whatever change is happening, all in the name of comfort. And this perspective really closes us off to what's truly happening and the likely negative repercussions that we're probably individually experiencing. We need to each individually be open to change and our role in it. We need to become comfortable at the front, or at least in the middle of the pack. We need to share, to transmit our willingness to be open to possibility. It's how we individually grow and develop. It's how we draw people to our cause, and it's how great things happen. We have to always also have that bias towards action. We have to be communicating about moving forward and that we are moving forward. How we choose to talk about this bias toward action is really significant. Our word choices are important because they position the work that we're doing and they set expectations. If change is constant and we're always going to be tweaking what we're doing, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot, we need to also emphasize that there is no done. We have to think about the language we use, just even in communicating about our projects, about the terms that we use. There's only the perpetually iterative process of improvement, and our language needs to support that. I think the reality is that those who need things to be finished, right, done, book closed, lid on the box, are not going to be very happy working in today's changing environment. But those who are already or who are willing to be in love with the idea that every day is new and that you can play a key role in shaping the direction, whether that's in your library, in the patron experience, in your work, in the library's work personally, you'll really find great satisfaction. Our choice of language is one of the most important things we can do to create a dynamic and an inclusionary environment. So again, we have to speak with action, which helps establish expectations. We have to call to action our colleagues and help them see their role and their contributions. And we have to welcome new contributions, which may often come in the form of constructive criticism. John Cotter, who's a well-known leader in change management, said that, quote, management's mandate is to minimize risk and keep the current system operating. Change, by definition, requires creating a new system, which in turn always demands leadership. Every moment in our professional lives is a moment that we can choose to move away from managing what's happening and instead to lead. And leadership happens at every level. It's formal in that the hierarchy of your organization might confer the opportunity to lead by virtue of your title or the projects you manage, the passwords that you hold. But it's also and strongly informal. Informal leadership is what we see happening in our open source community. We recognize good ideas and new opportunities can and should come from anyone and can come from everyone. As the title of a recent Harvard Business Review article said, boy, that was like a mouthful. Now more than ever is the time for us to, quote, lead with purpose and humanity. I think that's true broadly, where as individuals and those operating in a system must take strong action in support of our communities of color, to keep democracy alive, to address systemic inequity. It's also true immediately too. As COVID spread around the globe and stay-at-home orders were put in place, we must acknowledge that everyone's lives changed almost overnight. Our individual futures are incredibly uncertain, and our collective future is absolutely going to look different than our collective past. We may not know exactly what we're going to do, short or long term, but we do know we need to do it with kindness, with empathy, and with care. This is the bias to action we can and we should have. If we think about managing change, we really need to paint the picture of where we're going before the environment we're in becomes that new status quo and becomes the new status quo without any input from us. That's one reason why deliberate and thoughtful change management is really essential. For example, if you take kind of the current situation that we're in, people are certainly still mourning their ability to move freely and the opportunities they had to gather and socialize. They'll also mourn the loss of the flexibility that we've gained when we have to return to coming to work entirely in person, or that all of our business needs to take place face-to-face if we reduce virtual options or work from home ends up being suspended, whenever that may be. I see these changes in my own life, the time I've gained from no longer needing to commute, the changes I've been able to make to what we eat as a family, and increasing our vegetarian meals because I have more time to prep and to research. The pleasure of not having to get up really early to fit in my stretching or my yoga, because my teenagers don't need to get to school as early anymore. Losing any one of those things will be a loss, and losing them all will be honestly as devastating as having my whole former status quo upended. So I think it's really important to take a moment and think about what changes happened in your lives, whether personal or professional, and what you hope will stick from that. How can we move forward really learning, carrying forward the lessons that we learned, the positive lessons that we learned from this time? In 1947, German psychologist Kurt Lewin is credited with developing what is often viewed as the first change management process. And he used insights gained from his wide ranging research to describe a 3-step process of change. And that's unfreezing or overcoming inertia, change, where we grapple with what's to come, we figure out what we're doing, and freezing or refreezing, where we commit to the new way of doing things and set new habits. And that model is the basis for most change management processes and is most famously expanded on by John Kotter, who we heard from earlier, in his 8-step change model, which was first described in his 1995 book, Leading Change. And that's what's up on the screen here. So you can see that in this model, in Kotter's model, steps 1 through 4, establishing a sense of urgency, forming a powerful guiding coalition. These are 2 things that we've already touched on. Creating and then communicating a vision. Again, 2 things we've already talked about. Really falls under the unfreezing, right? The unlearning, the loosening up, the opening the opportunity to do new things. Steps 5, 6, and 7, so removing the obstacles, creating short-term wins, and building on what we've done are really in that making change happen, right? In that change, middle change section, right? We have to keep building on our success, and where we have to have small chunks that we could see the movement forward. And then similarly, that freezing or refreezing, anchoring the change in your culture. And so where most organizations fail in undertaking change is right at step number 1, in establishing a sense of urgency. So Kotter says the purpose of all this activity, in the words of one former CEO of a large European company, is to, quote, make the status quo seem more dangerous than launching into the unknown. It can be hard to grasp, but right now is a perfect time to undertake a transition because 2 of the major blocks to change have been completely disrupted for us. So we can't go back to the way it was before, and everyone has had to start doing something new. Whether we've wanted to or not, we've been unfrozen from where we were before. And so before a new bias for the status quo is developed, we have to ensure we're painting a clear picture for moving forward. We have to take advantage of that urgency. In Kotter's model, we would next bring together a diverse group of people to help us guide through the change. So Kotter, of course, in thinking about a work environment, says this group should have participants outside of senior management. Everyone in the group should be well connected, although that definition of well connected might vary from participant to participant. I'm going to touch on that in just a minute, a little bit more. But I did want to add, if you want to learn more about this model, he's written a number of articles for the Harvard Business Review, and you can read his book. I think the most helpful article is his 1995 article that's entitled Leading Change, Why Transformation Efforts Fail, and you can find that easily online. So again, I want to talk a little bit about bringing that diverse group together. When we think about change and change management, we're often so worried about getting everyone on board, and we often fall prey to focus on just one group of outliers, which are the naysayers. So these are the people that we see here right at the end of this really probably familiar change curve that you might have seen in the laggard group. So these aren't just people with questions. They are the staff who are adamantly opposed or who are most dedicated devil's advocates. The mistake that we often make in change work and in moving things forward is that we work really hard to get this group on board when they are the least likely to do so. So we create timelines and processes that work to bring that group along, and it is to the detriment of everyone else, all the rest of that majority who's participating. So we're really talking again about that 16% of laggards, or if you do the math, it's kind of the 2.5% who aren't even shown here. Those are the people who are never going to do it. I really think of them as the saboteurs on this version of the bell curve. We've all worked with them, and I bet we remember them from when we implemented our open source catalog, no matter how long ago it was. This is never going to work, and I'm just going to hold out, right? And I'm going to undermine this group, right? So I'm not just going to sit here and wait, but I'm going to see what I can do to stop this. I think we probably all have experiences working with people like this, again, personally or professionally, as we try to move things forward. But I really like this version of this kind of change management adoption curve, because the roles that people play are so clear, right? We see that last 15 or 20% are not just laggards, right? They'll work actively against what we're trying to establish. They're defectors and adversaries. And we have to ask ourselves, why do we spend so much time and resource on them? So let's think instead at the front end of that curve about the ambassadors. So who's eager and willing to try? Are you? Who's well connected in a project? Who knows how people feel? Who's the gossip mill? Who's great for spreading that word of mouth? If we're in management, we need to give those ability, the people, those people the ability to lead from where they are, right? And if it's you, if you're not in management, you need to take the initiative to lead from where you are. You need to use the power of that connection, that curiosity that you have to help move work forward. If we use our ambassadors wisely, right, so the ones who need little to no effort to get on board, then the early majority is where we can really make the most impact. That's the blue there. And they're the group I really gear my change management to. So I use a variety of different communication methods. I use staff listening groups. I use pilot projects, like I mentioned, to try things out so people can gain comfort. I ask for staff ideas on how to work towards solving a problem to better understand the fears in that early majority group. I make sure that people who are in that group can see what's happening, see the benefits of what's happening, and I make sure they can see their role in implementing or supporting the change or the process. And again, this might feel really easy to do if you're in a position of authority, right? Connoted formal authority. But you have the ability to do this whatever your position is. Because again, what happens is that if you're in that ambassador group at the front, and you can pull along that early majority group. Again, even if you're in that early majority group, you're pulling along that neutral group. So the power of your connections that you have, your willingness to try, your curiosity, all of those things, even if they don't feel like leadership opportunities, are those informal leadership opportunities that happen in action. And so if you see, again, your role in making change, it can really be transformative. And when you get kind of all those supporters on board, right, the early majority, again, they're the ones who create that tipping point and get you the momentum to get over that hump of that curve. So they can become your biggest supporters because they are the ones who can move the peers in that late majority or neutral category. And that category, that green category on this curve, they're the ones who are waiting to see what others do, but don't want to be left behind, right? So they don't want to be out in front, but they don't want to be left behind. And so now you've got 85% of your staff along for the ride, right? And the others either need to get on board or get off. That's the reality. But also say that we don't tend to think about how we can ensure our most underrepresented groups can participate. And if we do, if we're really being honest, it may be to think even subconsciously that it takes too much effort to include them. And we have to recognize and purposefully disrupt this kind of exclusionary thinking. So we have to develop and implement change processes that help us hear a range of voices, help strengthen our collaborations, and create a more inclusive process. Instead of letting the exclusionary and the oppressive thinking of the bottom 20% lead your change process, create the space for diverse voices and experiences in your ambassadors and help their inclusionary feedback, even if it is critical at first, shape a project. So the squeaky wheel isn't always in our defector or our adversary group. They're often sitting at the front in that innovators or that early adopters group. Think here again about how important language is. And what is perceived as a complaint, is there a call to action or a call to inaction? Somebody asking to do something, asking to contribute, or asking to not move something forward. So the first, right, with that call of action is probably an innovator. And the second, in that kind of let's not do anything, let's not go anywhere, is probably a defector. Is the language used, especially if it's a complaint, calling people together? Is it calling on us to find our shared vision? Is it calling on that shared humanity? Speaking with purpose, speaking with vision. Is the expression of loss, right, or even sometimes anger, tied to grief and not tied to a loss of power? That's an innovator. Language that excludes or oppresses, that seeks to maintain the status quo, especially at the expense of others, seeks to consolidate rather than share power. That's an adversary. For me, one of the most important concepts to the way I think about change and working to adapt services is something I heard Bob Quinn of the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business say, that maintaining the status quo is the path to a slow death. Think about it. You can never be great if all you're doing is keeping things the same. You can never rise above. Excellence, he says, is dynamic. So not only do we in libraries need to constantly be evolving to meet the ever-changing needs of our users and our communities, we also need to constantly evolve to ensure we're on the path to excellence, right? We have a dual call to action there. It's also really important to recognize that there's a difference between what you do, so the what, and the how you do it. So again, we can choose to lead with purpose and humanity. We can choose to be inclusive of contributions that welcome and expand our thinking. We can choose to celebrate the individual elements that together make a greater whole and celebrate processes that focus on collaboration. So Bob Sutton, who is I forgot to move the screen ahead, excuse me, who's a Stanford professor in organizational development, he understands that we've been undertaking the same thing, right? We have the same doing and have wildly different results because of the how we did it. So the quote after this goes on to say, change often entails actions that upset and hurt good people. Sometimes it's unavoidable in change, right? But if we accept that there are feelings of loss, sometimes significant loss, are the reality for people going through change, we can be acknowledging them openly and we can acknowledge them with empathy. We can be clear what has ended. We shouldn't let people struggle to figure it out themselves. We need to give people information, as much of it as often as we can, and be sure that that communication is supported by a plan. I once saw a presentation on managing change where the speaker stated, quote, plans are immensely reassuring to people, not just because they contain information, but because they exist. So again, if we think here, we have the opportunity, regardless of what level we are in an organization, what position we hold, to help acknowledge loss, help acknowledge grief, help support curiosity, help clarify information, help make sure that people have what they need to come to closure, to move on, to be excited, to celebrate, that their questions are answered. So we can, of course, expect, and our administration should be doing that for us. But if we're leading from where we are, especially through a change process, we have a clear opportunity to really take that leadership role and support our peers as well. Here's another Bob Quinn quote that I love. He says, quote, when we commit to a vision to do something that has never been done before, there's no way to know how to get there. We simply have to build the bridge as we walk on it. I think this is such an amazing image, right? And it's part of why I love this quote. If you need to get to the other side of the river, you know you need to cross it. You shouldn't fret about the fact that you have to cross it. That's a given. And instead, put your energy into how you're going to cross it, right? Gather your resources. Gather those who can help. Many hands make light work. Celebrate along the way that you've figured out how you're going to cross, that you've gathered the materials, that you've started building. Look at what you need to do next instead of the details 3 steps ahead, right? While always keeping the end goal, which is not the end, in mind. I think this quote is just a wonderful visual for handling the perpetual world that we live in. Crossing the river is that end goal, but we clearly wanted to cross the river for a reason. So what's next? You know where you have to go, and you know in general what you have to do to get there. If you focus on what's immediately in front of you, always in support of your end goal, and you think about how you can have many people contribute to making that happen, we're really working towards that end goal together. And again, that together piece is something I find really essential and really important when we're thinking about, again, living in a world of massive and an ongoing change, perpetual change, where we have to build our own skills, acknowledge our own fears, acknowledge our own needs to really help make sure that the project that we're working on, the organization that we're working for, or even just our own personal sense of success really feels acknowledged. And I also believe strongly that working together, really highlighting the strengths of the people that are around us, putting those strengths together to work toward that end goal, right? So, not the end, but that end goal, so that we have a better sense when we get there of the skills, the strengths, the needs, really helps prepare us for working together on the next goal, the next step. And so I want to just leave you remembering this image, right? So remembering that quote. If we're doing something that we've never done before, there's no way to know how to get there. And we can't let that stop us. We have to build the bridge as we walk on it. So I want to thank you for having me here today. And Lizette, I think we have plenty of time so people have some questions. I know we covered some big kind of concepts, and I tried to give some concrete ideas that you can use if you're someone who's in the midst of change or managing change or having change happen around you. So I'd be happy if there are any questions or kind of discussion points people would like to cover to make sure that we have time to do that.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was wonderful. And I just want to read you some of the comments from the YouTube chat.
Oh, thanks.
Nathan said, I love this presentation. Robin said, it's really speaking to me. Heather said, yes, this is TED Talk good. Jennifer
Thank
said,
you.
yes, simply having a plan is a reassuring foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's all really helpful. Heather also said, I also try to take a moment every morning to be mindful of how koha is a beautiful word meaning gift in
Mm-hmm.
Tia Rio, the language of the indigenous Maori people, and
Mm-hmm.
be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
And Tomas also said, very beautiful words. Informal leadership is something we're quite often lacking.
Mm-hmm. I think we feel afraid. I think we're so used, I think, especially right here in the US or in, really kind of like Western dominated hierarchy. We're so expect that leadership comes from above us, right? Instead of coming from next to us or coming from within us. But we have such an opportunity. And we know this, right? Because we can support or we can undermine what's happening around us. And in choosing to support it, we grow our own skills and we grow our own opportunities.
Definitely.
Well, I'm so pleased that people found it helpful. I think it's, again, when we're often in the midst of change, it's hard to take a step back, right, and recognize what's happening around us. And I think especially over the past 6 months, we've been dealing with this, right, like on overload times 10. And so being able to just take a moment and, again, celebrate and recognize the power that we do have, the opportunity that we do have, and the contributions that we can make and how powerful they are when we move together in the same direction, I think is really important to helping us stay connected and stay grounded in a period of, who knows? Who knows where we'll be next month, right?
Yeah. And, a lot of us are making changes that we might, that we needed to make to stay relevant and stay connected to our communities that we might end up rolling over, even when things go back to normal. Like we're probably going to keep doing curbside pickup at our library forever.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that our access services manager had actually implemented a few years ago when she was at a different library.
Mm-hmm.
And we had never done it here, but now we can, we're probably going to keep it going because we have a lot of patrons who, we're open now and still doing curbside a couple days a week. And we have some people who are like, this is perfect for me.
Yep.
I can drive up, leave the kids in the car for 30 seconds and run up. We've been doing it on like our front patio.
Yep. Yep.
Although when the weather changes, we'll have to reevaluate that. But, being able to use these changes and think about how they can help us not just to adapt to where we need to be now, but also to keep moving forward for ourselves and our organizations and our community in the future.
Yeah. And, I think we had this kind of universal experience of what it looks like to make changes happen very quickly, right? And I think like your story is similar to a lot of stories I hear, I think particularly from public libraries, where something that, the public had been requesting was certainly true at my own library, in Hillsborough, where people really wanted drive up delivery service. And we're like, drive up, drop off. We were just like, oh my gosh, with the volume that we had, the number of, right, there was always a reason not to do it. But very quickly, right, we had to make these quick changes. And the reality is for many of us, it looks like by the time we would even think about being to kind of start to untangle, or
Mm-hmm.
we'll have been doing them for a year, and that is long enough to certainly become the new status quo. And so we'll have to really be very thoughtful about what we choose to undo, what we choose to carry forward, and how we talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. We got a question about curbside pickup, just
Hmm.
like what is it? So how we have it set up is our patrons like make an appointment during set hours where they can come, and we've done it a few different ways. When we were closed, we were doing it one way, um, bef- and then we were doing it another way, and then when we reopened, it changed again. So
Yeah, I think a lot of libraries, I think the easiest, like a lot of libraries are doing, if you think, in kind of your vestibule or in your front doors, right? You often have the staff at a table behind there, so if you're in a library facility where people cannot come in, people line up, and just like most of us are doing at retail, right? Where we pick up the thing that we ordered ahead, or, some libraries are still, certainly doing kind of live reference requests and things like that. But I think that idea where, that the business of the library is happening on the curb.
yeah, so sometimes it's like right inside the front door or
Mhm.
right outside the front door.
Yeah.
Ours are on the patio, so um we have like a front patio that's kind of halfway between our front door and the street, and so we set up like a table there with the people who have made appointments, and for
Mhm.
every like 15-minute window we'll just set out all the people for that
Yep.
15-minute window,
Yep.
kind of in alphabetical order, and when they come we'll be like, yours is there, and it's
Yes.
already checked out to them, and we like sanitize our hands a million times every time we touch them, so they
Yes.
should
Yes.
be not have to worry about them too much. I know I actually live in a different town than I work, and they're doing it like kind of similarly, but they have a parking lot right by their front
Yeah,
door.
and they just put it like.
So they have, yeah, like you park in slot 1, 2, or 3,
Mhm.
and then you call them and you tell them your name and which slot you're in, and then they print it out and they'll either like put it in your car through a window,
Or in the
like have
trunk.
you roll down a window, or have you open the trunk.
Yeah, it's like how I get my groceries now.
Yeah, I got pet food last night. I just had to like call them and they rolled down my passenger window, and
But so many changes, so many changes. Some of which are going to be so useful. We'll need to figure out how to keep them.
yeah. Well, and like for Koha Bywater, they wrote a plugin for curbside that we haven't we've installed it on our system.
Uh-huh.
Our branches haven't started using it because we were actually using a different like third party scheduling software, and
Yeah.
we're training our staff this week
Awesome.
how to do
That is
it.
awesome.
Um, but like since we have that and it won't cost extra money like this third party
Hmm.
product did, why
Hmm.
not just keep using it?
Go Koha. I love it.
Yeah. So sometimes people think about just how things will change for right now to get to move forward,
Hmm.
to just or maintain things, not necessarily moving forward. But
Hmm.
then it's also important to think about how those changes can be used moving forward.
Yes. Yes. And what expectations we set, intentionally or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much. I don't know if you have more that have come through, but I encourage people, feel free to reach out to me. I welcome that. I'm terrible. I should say, like, I'm terrible on email, but I will write you back, just not as quickly as if you have questions or tag me on Twitter. I'm a little bit faster there. I think I feel about email the way many of us feel about email. So, but I'm happy to have people reach out and engage. And again, very thankful and honored to come and be part of the work that you're doing these next 2 days.
And thank you so much for
My
coming.
pleasure. My pleasure. Stay healthy, everyone.
Yes. So we have a little bit of time before our next presentation, and we're gonna go ahead and take a break. Our next presentation did get changed. Um, unfortunately, George isn't able to be here this afternoon. And so instead of his SQL nerdery, you're going to get my neat SQL tips and tricks that I've put together since Friday.
Go Lizette.
So we'll be back for that at, right, that's the next thing, at 12:15 Pacific, 3:15 Eastern, in about half an hour.
Perfect. Everybody has time for a coffee break.
Yes. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye, everybody.